It seems that the quite a lot of SaaS companies, they get their initial traction from outbound sales, right? And so that's kind of the first stage, right? Like, and then there's a point that they hit that it's like, cool. So we've pushed kind of outbound sales as much as we can. And now we want to start to basically integrate some marketing into this, right? What's the biggest shift in the mindset that a company has to go through, like in the shift from outbound sales to marketing for demand generation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously the lowest hanging fruit for most businesses is outbound, and when they crack that nut, that's fantastic. Unfortunately, the process that works really well with outbound, it doesn't always lend itself or smoothly transfer over to demand generation, right? So there's a lot of things in play when you're doing outbound. There's relationships, there's the opportunity to have longer conversations, there's the ability to communicate value based upon your interpretation of what the prospect is understanding about your business at that point in time in the conversation, especially when you're on the floor at trade shows and events. I mean, there's just a lot of personality that goes into that. And I think a good enterprise salesperson will understand that and cater to that specific situation. The web doesn't do that, right? So the web it's agnostic, and it needs to cater to everybody, right? So it needs to have a tone that speaks to the audience in a way that captures their attention. And I think that that the biggest shift in thinking when you're going from B2B outbound to inbound is really respecting the fact that you're putting the weight of creating interest on the website itself, in your messaging, in your ads, in your creative assets. A lot of the heavy lifting is now done there, as opposed to having somebody with a good smile and a great understanding of the product in person presenting it to you. And that's what we do, right? So we help try to figure that process out. How does that work? How do we take those assets that we're working offline and bring them into something that is going to be utilized online?
Makes sense. And what do you say? Because I'm sure this question happens all the time. But what do you say when it's like, okay, I could spend money on marketing, or I could just hire another 2 outbound salespeople, pretty much for the same price, right? Like, this is the cost in general to create some demand for a product in LinkedIn that is worth a certain amount of money per year. That's over, say, 50K, right? What do you say to the SaaS founder that sees the pricing, that hasn't actually taken a step towards this yet? They know they should be doing some kind of marketing, some kind of demand generation, and then they see the price, and so the cost of execution plus the cost of ads, you could hire 2 outbound salespeople. So what is the conversation around that? Like, what are some of the considerations that a SaaS founder should be thinking about at that point in time?
Yeah, I think that for the founder, obviously, putting another person on the phone or having them do outreach and do outbound is probably going to produce the quickest results, but it's not scalable, right? There's you have people in those seats, and obviously they have to do a good job. But there's a limit to what they can do. With a good marketing campaign, once it's dialed in and all the bugs have been worked out, that's highly scalable. If you're a small business and you have a very limited budget, look, outbound is a great approach. And I don't think any good marketer should tell a business owner, don't do outbound, only focus on inbound. I think that's disingenuous. But if you have a marketing budget and you're thinking long term, and you're thinking about how do you get your reps speaking to the most qualified prospects, how do you build a brand, how do you create interest and demand in the marketplace, well, that's where you want to invest in digital marketing. That's where digital marketing is going to be a great opportunity for you. But it's not going to be quick, right? And I think that there needs to be this understanding that moving money to digital is not like having salespeople on the phone or at conferences where deals could happen a lot quicker. You are going to need a longer runway with digital. And that's where the investment comes in. And that's really where you want to have a thoughtful approach to digital and how you get there and what does that plan look like. So
okay, let's say now that I have made the decision, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm not going to hire my 2 outbounders. I'm going to invest for the first time, like in a strategy to see if I can, just improve the marketing, just for the company. Because at that stage, I've been told is by the investors, by shareholders that we should be doing some kind of marketing. What does success look like? Okay, so just assume that, after we invest, how long should I be investing for? So what am I investing in, right? And then how do I know that now I've hit the point where this is what I should be expecting from the investment and from the campaign?
Right. So that's a huge question you just asked there, right? I could spend an hour just trying to answer that one question. So, how much time do we need? What are we going to be doing to get there? What does that look like? So we could break that down to one, what is the strategy? And one, I think part of our role here when we're working with a new client that comes on board is to understand how much marketing have they currently done? What sort of assets have they created internally to help support their own marketing efforts? So when we work with a company, the first thing we do is we want to understand where are they in the life cycle of their growth, right? And typically they're somewhat early stage. And we say, well, what have you done on inbound? What have you done on digital? Or has it always been outbound and relationships? And if it has always been outbound and relationships, then what sort of assets have you created there? For the most part, I would say most of the people that we speak with, most businesses fall in this phase called the validate phase, where they haven't really done too much on inbound, or they haven't created a significant number of assets to support their team. If they don't have these assets, and when I use the word assets, I'm talking about videos, I'm talking about case studies, white papers, good articles, things that you could push out to your audience and they will hopefully consume it and raise their hand for more information. If they haven't done any of that, well, then that all has to be created, right? And so you could expect that process could take a few months. One of the things that we do here is that we try to look for the easiest things that we could do, the easiest wins. What can we create as quickly as possible to speed up that process? And like as an example, it would be, creating podcast interviews, pushing videos on LinkedIn and outreach. So to go back to your question, if a client or the business doesn't have any of these assets, you can expect it to take, a few weeks to a few months. If they have a ton of great stuff, if they've already done this and they're coming to us with experience in digital and they've done a little bit, but they're not doing a great job, well, maybe they're in the validate but accelerate phase. So the next phase after validate is what we call the accelerate phase, where we have quantifiable information that we could look at. Our team could take a look at, their analytics. We could take a look to see how many leads are coming in. We take a look at the content, and maybe we could repurpose a lot of this. So getting to the audience is not it won't take as long as it usually should. And we could be up and running within a few weeks. So to answer that question, if owners wondering, well, how long will this take? You could expect it to take probably several weeks on the low end to, typically several months. But to really dial in a good campaign and have it humming, you want to go in with a mentality of this is something that you're going to do for 6 months, 9 months, a year, because it's not just having those assets and throwing them up. It's now testing to see if the audience is consuming that. No matter how good the agency is that you're working with, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to how receptive is the market to the product that you're putting out there.